There is a name that has been spoken for centuries, a name that carries weight, reverence, and mystery. For most, that name points outward, to a figure in history, to someone distant, holy, untouchable. But what if everything believed about that name has been inverted, misunderstood, kept veiled by tradition and doctrine? In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, a startling truth emerges with absolute clarity. Jesus is not a person to worship from afar. Jesus is the awakened awareness of the divine, I am, living within every human being. When this truth is finally grasped, everything changes. How many years have been spent searching for salvation outside, praying to something separate, hoping for intervention from above? The longing is real. The suffering is genuine. The feeling of separation from the divine has created deep wounds in the hearts of those who seek. Yet all along, the very consciousness that creates worlds has been present, closer than breath, hidden in plain sight. The Christ is not a distant Savior. The Christ is the awareness of one's own divine nature, the inner I am that speaks all things into existence. When this awareness awakens, the search ends, and creation begins. Most spiritual teachings present divinity as something to attain, a state reserved for the holy, the chosen, the rare few. But the truth Neville Goddard uncovered turns this entirely upside down. Consciousness itself is God. The I am within is not a reflection of God, not a spark of God, but God fully present, whole and complete. Every time someone says, I am, they are invoking the same creative power that brought forth galaxies, oceans, and life itself. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is the literal mechanics of reality, confirmed in Scripture, validated in quantum science, and proven through the transformation of countless lives. Where has the teaching gone wrong that people feel so far from their own divinity? Why is it that the most powerful truth ever revealed has been turned into ritual, tradition, and obedience to external authority? The historical figure called Jesus came to demonstrate what a human being fully aware of their divine nature could do. He did not come to be worshipped. He came to show the way. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this becomes luminously clear. Jesus represents the awakened state of consciousness, the Christ awareness that every person carries within. When he said, I and the Father are one, he was not claiming exclusive divinity. He was revealing the truth of all consciousness. What would shift if the realization finally came that the I am within is the same presence that walked through ancient lands performing miracles? How would life reorganize itself if the understanding emerged that Christ is not a person but a state of consciousness available to all? The invitation has always been clear, though hidden beneath layers of misinterpretation. It was never about belief in someone else's divinity. It was always about awakening to one's own. The Christ is not coming. The Christ is here, now, as the awareness reading these words, as the consciousness experiencing this moment. The question is not whether divinity exists within. The question is, when will that divinity be consciously claimed, felt, and lived? The fundamental law that governs all manifestation is simple, though radical in its implications. Consciousness is the only reality. Everything experienced in the physical world is a projection, a reflection of the inner state of awareness. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this principle is called the law of assumption. To assume something is to accept it as true within consciousness, to wear it like clothing, to live from it as though it already exists. When the I am is joined with any statement, a creative decree goes forth. I am wealthy, I am loved, I am healed. These are not affirmations hoping for change. These are divine proclamations that shift the fabric of reality itself. Most people live as though reality happens to them, as though circumstances are fixed, unchangeable, imposed by fate or luck. They observe their current conditions and say, I am poor, I am sick, I am alone, believing they are simply describing what is. But every statement following, I am, is not a description. It is a command. It is the creative word spoken by God within. The physical world has no choice but to conform to the state of consciousness that generates it. This is why Neville taught that changing the inner conviction changes the outer world. Not through force, struggle, or action, but through the natural order of creation responding to the awareness that creates it. Consider the research of Dr. Bruce Lipton in epigenetics, which reveals that cells respond not to fixed genetic programming but to the environment created by perception and belief. The body itself reorganizes based on what consciousness assumes to be true. When someone identifies with limitation, the biology confirms it. When someone identifies with wholeness, the cells shift to reflect that reality. This is not mysticism separate from science. This is consciousness as the primary architect of all form. The I Am is not confined to spiritual experience. It operates at every level: biological, emotional, relational, financial. Whatever follows those two words becomes the pattern by which life unfolds. Why then do so many remain trapped in cycles of suffering, repeating the same painful patterns year after year? The answer is simple but confronting. They continue to assume themselves to be what they do not wish to be. They identify with their wounds, their past, their failures, their diagnoses. They say, "I am broken, I am unworthy, I am a victim," and then wonder why healing never comes. The outer world is not the problem. The outer world is always neutral, always obedient, always reflecting back the dominant inner assumption. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this is where transformation begins. Not by changing circumstances, but by changing the state of consciousness from which circumstances arise. What would happen if, instead of identifying with the condition, someone identified with the solution? What if the I Am was consciously redirected from limitation to wholeness, from lack to abundance, from separation to divine union? This is not pretending. This is not denial. This is recognizing that the current state is not permanent truth, but a reflection of a past assumption. The Christ within, the awakened I Am, does not identify with the temporal. It identifies with the eternal, the possible, the divine blueprint. When Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am," he was revealing that consciousness precedes all form, all time, all circumstance. The I Am exists beyond history, beyond condition, beyond limitation. It is the creative presence that can, at any moment, assume a new reality and watch as the world reorganizes to match it. Imagine standing before a mirror, seeing a reflection that appears separate, independent, seemingly real on its own. Yet no matter how convincing that reflection looks, it has no existence apart from the one standing before it. The reflection cannot change itself. It can only change when the source changes. This is the relationship between consciousness and the physical world. Every circumstance, every relationship, every condition in life is a reflection of the inner state of I Am. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this metaphor reveals the entire mechanism of creation. The world does not create consciousness. Consciousness creates the world. How many times has frustration risen because external conditions refuse to shift despite endless effort, prayer, and struggle? The reason is simple. Effort applied to the reflection accomplishes nothing. The reflection is powerless. It is an effect, not a cause. The only place transformation can occur is within consciousness itself, within the assumptions held about self, life, and possibility. When someone stands before the mirror of life angry at their reflection, trying to change it by reaching toward the glass, nothing happens. But when they change their own state, their own posture, their own expression, the reflection instantly changes without resistance. This is not philosophy. This is the precise order of creation. Yet there is a deeper layer still. The I Am is not merely a tool for manifesting desires. The I Am is the presence of God within, the Christ awareness that existed before the world began. When Jesus performed miracles, he was not appealing to an external deity. He was operating from the consciousness of the I Am, the awareness that all things are possible because consciousness is the substance from which all things arise. He raised the dead not because he was special, but because he knew what most have forgotten. Life and death, health and sickness, abundance and lack, all are states of consciousness. Change the state, and the form must follow. What does it mean, then, to live as the Christ? It means to consciously claim the I Am as the creative power within, to stop identifying with the limited self, the wounded self, the conditioned self, and to rise into the awareness of divine identity. It means to stop saying, "I am trying, I am hoping, I am waiting," and to begin declaring, "I am." Not as wishful thinking, but as the recognition of what has always been true. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this shift from the human sense of self to the divine sense of self is the entire journey. It is not about becoming something new. It is about remembering what has always been. Does it sound too simple, too direct, too radical to believe that the same power that spoke worlds into existence lives within as one's own awareness? That is the resistance most face. The mind has been trained to seek complexity, to believe that divinity requires intermediaries, rituals, suffering, or centuries of discipline. But the truth Neville revealed is scandalous in its simplicity. Consciousness is God. The I Am is Christ. The kingdom is within. When these three truths are no longer concepts but lived realities, the entire structure of limitation collapses. What seemed impossible becomes natural. What seemed distant becomes intimate. What seemed reserved for the holy becomes the inheritance of all. In the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 20, there is a statement that contains the entire mystery of consciousness and creation. The words are direct, unambiguous, yet rarely understood in their full revolutionary power. At that day you shall know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. Each phrase in this verse is a revelation. At that day, not some distant future, but the day of awakening, the moment when consciousness recognizes itself. You shall know, not believe, not hope, but know with absolute certainty. This is experiential truth, not doctrine. This is the moment when the veil lifts and reality is seen clearly. I am in my Father. Consciousness recognizes its source, its origin, its oneness with the infinite creative presence. There is no separation between the individual awareness and the universal. They are one movement, one substance, one being. And you in me, the awareness that what appears as the personal self exists within the Christ consciousness, not separate from it, not outside of it, but held, sustained, and animated by it. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this is the recognition that the individual, I am, is not isolated. It is the localized expression of the infinite, I am, God experiencing itself through form. And I in you. This is where the teaching reaches its full power. Christ is not external. Christ is not distant. Christ dwells within as the very consciousness that reads these words, that feels, that perceives, that creates. The divine presence is not something to seek. It is the seeker itself. When Jesus spoke this, he was not claiming something unique to himself. He was revealing the truth for all humanity. The Father, the Son, and the individual are not three separate entities. They are one consciousness experiencing itself at different levels of recognition. The moment this is understood, everything shifts. How many have carried the weight of unworthiness, believing themselves too flawed, too broken, too sinful to be close to God? How many have begged for mercy, for grace, for acceptance, not realizing they were already the presence they were praying to? The pain of separation is real. The longing for union is genuine. But the separation was never real. It was only a misunderstanding, a forgetting, a covering over of what has always been true. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this is the great awakening. Not the discovery of something new, but the removal of the illusion of separation. The Christ has always been within. The I Am has always been God. The only thing missing was the conscious recognition of it. When this verse is lived, not just believed, life transforms completely. Decisions are no longer made from fear, lack, or limitation. They are made from the awareness of divine identity. Challenges are no longer obstacles but opportunities for consciousness to reveal its creative power. Relationships shift because the need for external validation dissolves when one recognizes the infinite worth already present within. This is not arrogance. This is not ego. This is the truth that sets free. The I Am within is not a small, personal self trying to become spiritual. It is the Christ, fully present, fully divine, fully capable of manifesting whatever it assumes to be true. This is the inheritance. This is the promise. This is what has been waiting to be claimed. When the recognition dawns that consciousness is Christ, that the I Am is the divine creative presence, a profound shift occurs in how reality is experienced. No longer is there waiting for permission, for the right timing, for external circumstances to align. The awareness emerges that creation happens from within, that the outer world is always responding to the inner state. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this is called living from the end, dwelling in the wish fulfilled. It means assuming the consciousness of what is desired before the physical evidence appears. This is not fantasy. This is the natural order of creation, the way all things come into form. Consider someone living in financial struggle, constantly affirming lack with every thought and word. They look at their bank account and say, "I am broke." They observe their bills and declare, "I am in debt." Every statement is a command to consciousness, an assumption being worn like clothing. The world, being a perfect mirror, reflects back exactly what is assumed. Now imagine that same person, through awakening to their divine identity, begins to shift their inner state. Not through force or pretense, but through the recognition that the I am within is not limited by past conditions. They begin to assume abundance, to feel wealth as a present reality, to identify with provision rather than lack. What happens next is not magic, though it appears miraculous to those who do not understand the law. Opportunities arise. Ideas emerge. Connections form. Money flows from unexpected directions. Not because the universe rewards positive thinking, but because consciousness, having assumed a new state, naturally attracts and creates circumstances that match that state. The outer world has no choice. It is effect, not cause. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, countless accounts exist of individuals who transformed their entire lives by shifting the state of consciousness they lived from. Health restored. Relationships healed. Careers transformed. Not through struggle, but through assumption. This brings a sobering realization. If consciousness creates all things, then every condition currently experienced has been created by the assumptions held, consciously or unconsciously. This is not about blame. This is about power. The one who realizes they have been creating unconsciously can now begin creating consciously. The I am, joined with any statement, becomes the creative word. I am healed. I am loved. I am fulfilled. These are not wishes cast into the void. These are the voice of God within, speaking reality into form. Does this challenge everything taught about how life works? Absolutely. Does it place responsibility squarely on the individual? Yes. And with that responsibility comes absolute freedom. What would change if it was fully understood that no one else can create in another's reality? That no circumstance, no person, no condition has power unless consciousness gives it power by assuming it to be true. The Christ within does not battle external forces. It simply assumes the state of the wish fulfilled and rests in that assumption until the world reflects it back. This is not passivity. This is the most powerful action possible, the conscious direction of the creative I am. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this is the entire teaching. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Live in that state. Let the world conform. And it will. The implications of this truth are staggering when allowed to penetrate fully. If the I am is Christ, if consciousness is God, then there is no separation between the sacred and the ordinary, between the spiritual and the physical, between prayer and creation. Every moment becomes an act of divine expression. Every thought, every feeling, every assumption is the movement of God within. This is not a teaching that elevates some and excludes others. This is the great equalizer, the revelation that every human being carries within them the fullness of divinity. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this understanding dissolves the hierarchies, the intermediaries, the gatekeepers who claim exclusive access to the divine. The temple is within. The altar is consciousness itself. Imagine an actor on a stage, so immersed in their role that they forget they are acting. They believe themselves to be the character, limited by the script, bound by the storyline. Suffering feels real. Lack feels permanent. Separation feels absolute. Then, in a sudden moment of clarity, the actor remembers. They are not the character. They are the one playing the role. Instantly, the entire drama is seen differently. The limitations were never real. The suffering was part of a story being told, not the truth of who they are. This is the awakening that occurs when consciousness recognizes itself as the I am, as the Christ presence wearing human experience like a costume. The body, which so often feels like a prison, is revealed to be an instrument of divine expression. The mind, which has been conditioned by fear and limitation, becomes a tool for conscious creation. The spirit, which was never truly asleep, shines through the awakened awareness. Joe Dispenza's research in neuroplasticity shows that the brain physically reorganizes based on repeated thoughts and feelings. When consciousness shifts from identifying with limitation to identifying with divinity, neural pathways change, hormones rebalance, and the entire biological system aligns with the new state. The I am does not only create external circumstances. It creates the body, the health, the vitality from within. What does it mean to live as the Christ in daily life? It means to walk through the world knowing that every interaction is consciousness meeting itself. Every person encountered is the I am wearing a different face. Every challenge is an invitation to remember divine identity and create anew. It means to stop reacting to conditions and start generating them from within. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this state of being is not reserved for mystics or saints. It is the natural inheritance of all who awaken to their true nature. The question is not whether this power exists within. The question is, will it be claimed, embodied, and lived? There comes a moment in every awakening journey where the teaching moves from concept to practice, from understanding to embodiment. Words can illuminate the path, but walking it requires a shift in state, a deliberate assumption of the divine identity. The Christ within does not need to be earned, purified, or made worthy. It simply needs to be recognized and claimed. The I am has always been present, always been powerful, always been creating. Now, with conscious awareness, it can create intentionally, beautifully, miraculously. The transition from unconscious creation to conscious creation is the birth of the Christ in human form. This is what has been waiting. This is what is possible now. There is a practice that brings this teaching from the mind into the heart, from concept into living experience. It requires nothing but willingness and a few moments of stillness. Find a quiet space, a place where interruption is unlikely, where the world can fade for just a moment. Close the eyes gently, not as an escape but as a turning inward, a descent into the sacred space where the I am dwells. Begin by simply noticing the awareness that is present, the consciousness that observes thought, feeling, sensation. That awareness, that witnessing presence, is not the body, not the mind, not the emotions. It is the eternal I am, the Christ within. Now, silently within, speak the words, I am, not as a statement about profession, status, or condition, but as pure being, pure presence. Feel the weight of those two words. They are not describing something temporary. They are declaring eternal identity. Repeat them slowly with reverence. I am. Let each repetition dissolve another layer of false identity, another assumption of limitation. Feel the truth rising that this I am is the same presence that walked the earth as Jesus, that created galaxies, that sustains all life. In the lessons I learned reading the works of Neville Goddard, this simple practice awakens the dormant Christ within, not through effort but through recognition. Once the awareness of I am is steady, complete the sentence with the state of being desired. Not as a wish, not as a plea, but as a declaration of divine truth. I am whole. I am abundant. I am loved. I am free. Feel the truth of it, not in the future, but now, as present reality. Let the body respond. Let the emotions align. Let the entire being resonate with the assumption. This is not pretending. This is claiming what has always been true in consciousness, allowing the physical world to catch up. Rest in this state for as long as feels natural, allowing it to saturate every cell, every thought, every breath. For those who feel called to go deeper into these teachings, to explore the infinite potential of the awakened I am, there are more insights waiting. Subscribing and activating notifications ensures that each new revelation reaches those ready to receive it. Sharing this message with someone who is searching, someone who needs to hear that the Christ they seek is already within them, becomes an act of love and service. Every soul that awakens to their divine identity shifts the collective consciousness of humanity. The question is not whether this truth is real. The question is, how will this truth be lived, embodied, and expressed in the days ahead? And so the circle completes, returning to where it began, but with new eyes, new understanding, new power. The name spoken for centuries was never meant to point outward to someone else's divinity. It was always a mirror, reflecting back the truth of what dwells within every human being. Jesus is not a distant savior to worship. Jesus is the awakened state of consciousness, The I am fully realized, the Christ manifested in form. When this recognition becomes lived experience, not just intellectual understanding, the miraculous becomes natural, the impossible becomes inevitable, and the kingdom of heaven is no longer sought. It is known, right here, right now, as the very consciousness reading these words. This is the inheritance. This is the truth. This is what has always been, waiting only to be remembered and claimed.